Today we have Maggie Christofferson joining us. Very happy to have Maggie here from the Alzheimer's Association. And Maggie's going to be presenting on understanding and responding to dementia-related behavior. So Maggie, I'll go ahead and let you take it away. And thanks so much for being with us today.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you all. So just a little bit about my background. I am the education coordinator and trainer at the Alzheimer's Association, and I actually started as a caregiver in 1996. And I cared for lots of different people with dementia. I cared for people with Korsakov's disease, cerebral vascular disease, Alzheimer's disease. I cared for a lot of folks with spinal cord injuries, and traumatic brain injuries come with that sometimes. And then from 2011 until 2018, I taught caregiving classes for the state of Washington. And I've been with the association now for 2.5 years. And I absolutely love presenting information and raising concern and awareness. So I am by no means an expert. This is just, this presentation is written by the Alzheimer's Association, and I get to deliver it. And, some of these examples or some of these, things that I've done right and things that I've done wrong have just come from a lot of years of caregiving. And so I'm going to go ahead and start presenting. Last time we had an issue with presenting my screen. So let's make sure we can actually present this time. Can everybody see that?
Yes, look good.
Yes. Good.
Yeah, just video is the challenge really, but other than that.
Well, we'll see about the video.
Yeah.
It might work, it might not. Okay, so by the end of today's lesson, I also wanted to mention very quickly, I have a dog who likes to bark at this time of day. So it's really all times a day. I say that every time I give a presentation. It's all times a day. So if he barks, I've got my trusty squirt bottle. So hopefully he won't. So by the end of today's program, you're going to be able to identify some common triggers for behaviors that are associated with dementia. You're going to be able to explain the process for assessing and identifying challenging behaviors. And we're going to talk about the strategies to address some common dementia-related behaviors. And before we start, let's just kind of talk about what behavior is and kind of what behavior isn't. Behavior is another form of communication. So communication is defined as sending and receiving messages. And we send and receive messages for all sorts of reasons. We send and receive messages to express ourselves. We talked about this last week, right? We send and receive messages to get our needs met, our wants met. We send and receive messages for entertainment, to, explore. We communicate for all sorts of different reasons. And behavior is another form of communication. Behavior is just another way to send and receive messages. So that's what behavior is. Behavior isn't something that somebody does to be antagonistic or something that somebody does on purpose. Or, when I was being trained as a caregiver, sometimes I would hear people say, well, they're just doing this to be stubborn. They're just doing this to be, because they're strong-willed. They're just, whatever. And it's like, no. People are exhibiting behaviors because that's the way they are able to communicate at that moment. And I have to tell you that when I finally learned that, it really, really made caregiving a lot easier for me. And it also enhanced the care that I was able to give to people. So people have behavioral changes for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's pain or discomfort. Sometimes it's overstimulation or boredom. Sometimes it's fear or frustration, unfamiliar surroundings, complicated tasks. And if we look at these one by one, if you look at, I took a training one time on, it was a training on challenging behaviors exhibited by nonverbal adults. And the trainer was somebody that had specialized in this for years and years and was giving this training as kind of a response to a lot of incidents that had happened at this home health agency that I was working at. And he said, one of the reasons that people have aggressive behaviors. 75% of the reason people will have aggressive behaviors if they are nonverbal is because of pain or discomfort. If you're not able to tell somebody that you're in pain or that you're uncomfortable, after a while, that just becomes too much. A lot of folks with Alzheimer's will get overstimulated. The brain is doing a lot of work when somebody has Alzheimer's. It is overcompensating for areas of the brain that have atrophied, areas of the brain that aren't working very much anymore. So if we think about what is overstimulating to us, it's probably somebody with Alzheimer's could get overstimulated a lot more quickly. Fear or frustration. There is a lot of frustration that goes along with having Alzheimer's disease. Things that you used to be able to do, you can no longer do. Things that you used to be able to say, things that you used to be able to remember, parts of your life are gone. It's extremely frustrating. The other thing is Alzheimer's, for some reason in a lot of people, tends to stimulate the amygdala, which is that flight or fight response. And so if your loved one seems more heightened, seems more nervous, it's probably because their amygdala is being heightened. Unfamiliar surroundings can really cause a lot of challenging behaviors or just behaviors that are changing. People get very nervous in unfamiliar locations. They don't know what's going to happen. And tasks that may not seem complicated to us can become complicated to somebody that has Alzheimer's disease. All right, so for understanding and addressing behavior, because that's our goal, right? If our goal with effective communication was to connect, our goal with behavior is to understand what this person is trying to communicate and to address it. And that is a whole new way of looking at behavior. When I was a caregiver, when I first started, the way we looked at behavior is just we wanted it to stop, right? We didn't like the behavior. We didn't think the behavior was helpful. We thought the behavior was upsetting and we wanted it to stop. And I got to tell you, it didn't work. It didn't work. We had to understand the behavior and find a way to address the behavior because we had to understand what somebody was trying to communicate. And then we had to find a way to figure out how to help them, how to alleviate their pain, how to, calm them down, whatever it was. We had to understand it, and then we had to do something about it. So there's 4 steps, and these might not work with every behavior. And because Alzheimer's can be kind of challenging, these might work on Tuesday like gangbusters, and you might think, oh my gosh, finally a solution, yay. And then on Thursday, it's like, no, that didn't work out anymore, right? So it may not work all the time, but at least we're kind of moving towards some solutions. So the first one is to detect and connect. And let's go over that. So we want to join the person in their reality. We want to see the world through their eyes. We want to understand what they're seeing. We want to understand what they're feeling. We really want to detect and connect by joining the person in their reality. So when you look at a behavior and you're trying to really see their reality, start to ask yourself some questions. It's almost like you're a detective, right? So who, what, when, where, how? So who was there when the behavior took place? What was it that was happening? Where does it happen? When does it happen? How often does it happen? What does the behavior look like? So you're starting to look for patterns. Is this a behavior that always happens in the morning? Does it always happen at mealtime? Does it always happen, when you're trying to get the person to do activities of daily living, brush their teeth, put on clothes, take a shower, and they may not want to? What took place before the behavior? What took place after the behavior? And we always want to approach the person calmly and respectfully, even if it looks like that behavior makes no sense to you and it's completely out of left field and it doesn't, you cannot imagine why they would be acting that way. Really approach them calmly and respectfully. So the next one is to address physical needs first. So if you've done the who, what, when, where, how, if you've done the 5 W's and you still don't know, then it might be something physical. So it could be that that person is in pain, and it could be that they're in pain and they don't know how to express they're in pain. So is it a medication issue? Is there a new medication? Was a medication reduced? Could the person be having a urinary tract infection? A lot of older adults that have challenging behaviors, especially when they have Alzheimer's disease, it is because of a urinary tract infection. So if your loved one is experiencing challenging behaviors and you haven't figured out why, it's not a bad idea to take them in for a urinalysis. Could it be that they're hungry, that they're thirsty, that their clothes are uncomfortable, that their shoes are too tight, that they have to go to the bathroom, that they're constipated? I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But the thing is if you can't express yourself correctly, if you can't express yourselves in ways that other people understand you, and something physical is going on, it is really hard to not have a challenging behavior. It also could be environmental, right? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Is it too loud? Is it too bright? Is the lighting wrong? Call me crazy. I know everybody does, but I hate overhead lighting. I hate it like nobody's business. I think it's the ugliest lighting I've ever seen. I go into other people's houses and I want to turn it off and turn on some lamps. And unless I really need to see something, I don't like overhead lighting at all. And so, if I was in a room with all overhead fluorescent lighting, you better believe I wouldn't be very comfortable. And I'd probably be exhibiting some challenging behaviors. And hopefully somebody would look for some environmental triggers. And remember, just because you're not cold doesn't mean that your loved one isn't cold. Older adults have thinner skin. They have not poor circulation, but their circulation isn't as good as somebody in middle age. They've lost that fatty layer of tissue. And so even if you have the heat on to 90, they may still be cold, because it's a really good idea to layer for warmth rather than turn the heat on high for warmth. I mean, sometimes we have to do both. But I know as a caregiver, I would be fine, and the person that I was caring for would be really cold. So if that's something else to check for. All right. And then maybe look at their emotional needs. Look at their emotional needs. Are they sad? Are they angry? Are they frustrated? Did something happen? Did they take something that you said wrong? Are they feeling left out? Are a lot of people talking about them like they're not there? I had I think I told you guys this last week, but I had the, privilege of sitting in on an early stage memory loss conference, and I got to sit in with the folks that were experiencing early stage memory loss. And one of the things they said many, many times was, everybody talks about me like I'm not here. Everybody talks about me like I'm not here. Everybody acts like I can't do anything. I just feel really left out. And so really try to figure out what their feelings are. And we don't focus on facts. So if someone's upset because they're late for work, or somebody's upset because they're late to pick their kids up from school, or somebody's excited because they're telling you they're going on a date with their partner, and none of these things are true, we don't focus on the facts. We focus on the feelings. The facts are no longer relevant. The facts are extremely fluid when somebody has Alzheimer's disease. And if we focus on facts, we are constantly going to be in conflict with somebody. So to redirect, to try to calm them down, to try to soothe them, use your knowledge of their preferences. What do they like to talk about? What do they like to do? What's an activity that soothes them? What's an activity that just kind of calms them down and brings them to that kind of resting place. So redirect their energy into a more soothing activity. And here's, why do I forget her name? Here's Rose. Let's see if this video plays. And if not, I'll just tell you what she said. It is not going to play. So what Rose said is that her mother spent a lot of time in the kitchen and really liked to do dishes. She liked to fold towels. She liked to wash vegetables. She just liked to be in the kitchen, and that was her routine. And so they kept her busy doing things in the kitchen. And so thinking about that person's daily routine, you know, are they a morning person? Are they a night person? You know, what are some of the things that were part of their routine? Do they always have coffee before they eat? Is there a particular breakfast that they like to eat? You have to remember, our preferences are who we are. Our preferences make up who we are. And when our preferences are honored, it gives us calm, it gives us peace, and it also makes us feel like the person that's caring for us, the person that's there helping us, really knows us, really loves us, you know, really is paying attention. So our preferences are really important. Making sure somebody has those preferences that they like. You know, if I was going to go take care of my dad, I know that he'd need his coffee black. He would need some grapefruit. You know, he would want to sit and talk about biking, or when he used to be a teacher, or his dog, which is his new obsession. So I would have to think about his preferences. All right. So after you've done all that, you go back to detecting and connecting, joining that person's reality, and you ask yourself, what went well and what didn't? So what was a good intervention that you had? What was a good way to calm that person down? Did you figure out what was upsetting them? Did you figure out why they were exhibiting that challenging behaviors? And now how can you make adjustments? How can you make adjustments? So how, for instance, I think I told you guys this last week, my stepmom has Alzheimer's, and she is in a phase right now where she doesn't want to eat. And so, you know, we are not asking her what she wants to eat anymore, because she'll just say she's not hungry. She'll just say no. So my dad and my daughter are just making food. They're just offering her food. They're making food that we know she likes, and they're giving it to her, and she's eating more. So it's just every day is about reassessing and figuring out what worked and what didn't. So we can apply these to any behavior. And let's talk about anxiety or agitation. Before we do so, does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. So, as was mentioned before, when somebody has Alzheimer's, oftentimes the amygdala is heightened, that area of the brain that is responsible for you fighting or fleeing, right? And for some reason, Alzheimer's disease heightens that area of the brain. And so what you see is people are more anxious, they're more restless, they're pacing, they're distressed, they seem distraught, and they start to have an over-reliance on caregivers. It's almost like they Velcro themselves to that person. They want to see where the caregiver is all the time. They don't want to be alone. They're no longer content to do their own thing. They really, really want to check in with that caregiver all the time. These behaviors can be really problematic and tiring for families. And so how can we take those 4 steps and figure out how to take those 4 steps and what we can do about these challenging behaviors using those steps? So we have a fictional character that we're going to talk about, and her name is Anne. And Anne has been very anxious and agitated. And Anne used to be an emergency room nurse, and she worked the night shift. And every single night at about 6:30, Anne starts to pace, and she paces up and down and up and down and up and down. She's lost weight because she won't eat. She's developed a blister on one of her feet, and her family is at a loss of how to help Anne. They don't know how to help Anne. They have no way of getting her to see that she doesn't work anymore. So if we look at these 4 steps and we apply it to Anne's situation, what can we do? So the first thing we want to do is detect and connect, right? So we already know the who, what, when, where, how, and why, you know, right? We already know that it happens at the same time every day. We know what it happens, what time it happens. We know why it happens, right? She thinks that she has to go to work. So we already know all those. But if we really focus, if we do those addressing the emotional needs and we focus on the feelings rather than the facts, what we come up with, if we're joining her reality, is that she feels like she's late to work. She feels like she's late to work. And how do we feel when we're late to work, right? We feel anxious. We feel nervous. We feel that gotta go feeling. We feel like we're going to be in trouble. We feel like we're letting people down. It's a terrible feeling. So the first thing we want to do is to get into that mindset. She is scared. She feels like she's late to work. The second thing we want to do is to address her physical needs. She's hungry. She is hungry. So what can we do about that? Could they maybe eat dinner earlier? Could she have a late snack? Could they find something that she can hold while she's walking? Something to get those calories in, right? And we want to look at that blister on her foot. Is there something that we need to cover it with? Does she need bigger shoes? Are her socks rubbing weird, right? And then address her emotional needs. So she's anxious, she's nervous, she feels like she needs to go to work, and it's that problem that needs to be solved, right? The problem is that she really believes that she's supposed to go to work and she's late. So we at the Alzheimer's Association would counsel this family to come up with a therapeutic fib. And a therapeutic fib is not lying. It is coming up with something that is going to soothe her, something that is going to make her feel better. I had a student whose mother had been a professor at a local university, and every single day for about a year, she would come out of her bedroom extremely anxious and upset, and she would say, "Oh my gosh, I'm late for my class. My students are waiting for her." And, at first her daughter didn't know what to do. She would try telling her, you don't work anymore, Mom, you're retired, all this other stuff. Nothing worked. One day, out of desperation, she said, "Mom, it's Saturday." And her mom just calmed down. She said, "Oh my gosh, thank goodness." That was a therapeutic fib. It wasn't Saturday every single day, but it worked for her. So we come up with a therapeutic fib. Your boss called and, they don't need you today. It's your vacation. It's Saturday. Whatever it is. But a therapeutic fib that calms her down. And then we want to reassess and plan for next time. So the other thing that might be happening if we go back to physical needs and emotional needs kind of tied together is sundowning. A lot of people will experience an exacerbation of behaviors as it gets darker. And there's a lot of different reasons for this. But there are some solutions. We can make sure that the drapes are closed at an earlier time. We can make sure that the lighting is soft. We can make sure that it's not super chaotic in the house. I know that for our family, we had to turn the news off. We can play music that's soothing. We can give somebody something to eat a little bit earlier. We can give somebody, the opportunity to get more exercise during the day. So there's a whole bunch of different things that we can do if we plan ahead. And that's one of the things that's kind of hard for caregivers that are caring for family members that have this disease, is that your life is no longer your own. We can't just live every day on spur of the moment anymore, or do what we want to do. People with Alzheimer's disease really thrive on routine. They really thrive on routine. So trying to find a routine that can keep this from happening again is really one of our best bets. So the next behavior is confusion or suspicion. And I'm just going to pause for a second. Were there any questions that I need to answer about the last behavior?
And just as a reminder, everyone's muted. So if you do have a question, you just want to make sure you unmute yourself so we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So this one is really difficult for family and friends, right? Confusion or suspicion. When our loved one doesn't recognize us, when they don't recognize familiar places, when they don't recognize familiar things, when they accuse others of theft, infidelity, when they have delusions, right? When they have beliefs that are persistent despite evidence, it is hurtful. It is scary. I remember one time I saw my stepmom at the grocery store. We live in the same neighborhood, and she did not know who I was. And I had to remember, it's an unfamiliar location. It's out of context. She doesn't see me here very often. So I just let it go. I didn't say anything. I just acted like I was just a stranger. And it did hurt for a second. And then I had to remember, okay, well, this is the disease. It's not because she doesn't love me. It's not because she doesn't care about me. It's because that area of the brain that is responsible for locating people, locating places, for understanding exactly what is going on, is just not working anymore. And so I have to remember that, and it's hard. And this is one of the reasons why I think we talked about this in effective communication. It's a really good idea to start identifying yourself when you see somebody, especially if you're in a location that they don't normally see you in. So, just really remembering that they may not know who you are right away. And some of these things that people accuse their family members of and their friends of, theft, they're not doing this, to be mean. They're doing it because they're putting things in places and they can't remember where they are. And they can't remember that they put them someplace that they don't remember where they are. They just think they're gone. And so they're not doing it to be harmful or hurtful. They're doing it because they don't remember. So if we look at Anne, there's another story about Anne. Anne is having a family gathering, and it's about 6:30 at night, and the drapes are open, and everybody's coming in, and Anne is seeing people in the window. She's seeing people in the window, and she thinks they're really there. And she's telling her family, there are people in the house. There are people in the house. Get rid of them. Do something. And her family is just kind of ignoring her and not really addressing her concerns. So if we look at those 4 steps, detect and connect, we join her reality. So what is she seeing? What is happening? She is scared. She thinks there's people in the house. It doesn't seem like there's anything physical going on. The only emotional thing that seems to be going on is that she's confused and she's afraid. But if we look at the environmental factors, if we look at the environmental factors of what's going on in the room, there's that time of night where your reflection looks like somebody's in the house. I don't know about you guys, but I've walked by a window before and I've said, oh my gosh, who is that? And it's like, oh, that's me. Well, Anne's brain is not able to say, hey, that's me. To her, it just looks like there's somebody in the house. And when her family is ignoring her and not hearing her fear and anxiety and her concerns, right? They're not validating her at all. It's just making it worse. So really, what they need to do is to keep the drapes closed so that doesn't happen again. And then if it does happen, to just simply join her reality and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Let's get them out of here. I was at a long-term care facility and I saw a video during a training where this woman was convinced that there were snakes in her wheelchair. And instead of the caregiver saying, there's no snakes in your wheelchair, what's going on? The caregiver said, oh my gosh, let me get that out of there for you. And they said, okay, well, we removed the snakes. And the woman said, oh, they're still there. And they said, well, let me hit it with something. Let me hit the snake. And so they hit the snake and it was still there. And then they said, well, let's just get you a new chair. This chair is obviously bad. It has snakes in it. And they got her a new chair. She was good to go. That's joining their reality, right? The whole goal, the whole end goal is to soothe that person, to calm that person down. How we do it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. So Anne's family, going forward really needs to make sure those blinds are closed before it starts to look like this. I actually had to get drapes in my house because my stepmom was starting to get nervous when she'd come over for dinner and the windows looked like people were in the house. And I've noticed since I've had drapes, she's not nervous at dinner anymore, right? So it's just planning. All right, the next one is aggression. So aggressive behavior may be verbal, it may be physical, it may occur suddenly, and it may emerge following a trigger. A lot of aggressive behavior occurs during activities of daily living. So helping somebody get dressed, helping somebody go to the bathroom, helping somebody take a shower, helping somebody do things that they normally do by themselves. And, you know, the aggressive behavior can be very painful for family and friends. I had a gal with a traumatic brain injury who just used to say terrible things to me. You know, she wasn't nice at all. I've had clients, I had a client with Korsakov's, you know, slap me in the face. It is not intentional. These people aren't doing these things on purpose. They're having aggression, probably out of fear, and they're reacting. And so if we look at Anne, so Anne comes into the den in her house, and her husband is standing against the wall with his arms crossed watching TV. And Anne comes in and says to her husband, Bob, "You're not the boss of me. I can do whatever I want." Well, Bob ignores her, which makes her angry. And so she goes up to him and says it again, and he ignores her again. And so then she hits him. And Anne, before Alzheimer's disease, was never physical. And finally, to get away from Anne, Bob locks himself in the bathroom, but he doesn't take his cell phone. And there are guns in the house because they've both been avid hunters. So if we look at Anne's situation, so we detect and connect, right? We know when the behavior is happening. We know possibly why the behavior happened. You know, could this be because Bob's ignoring her? Could this be because of Bob's body posture? Is he standing in a way? Could it be because, you know, she was upset about what was on TV? We have to detect and connect. We have to look for anything physical. Could this be possibly a urinary tract infection? Could this be a medication reaction? Could she be hungry? Could she be agitated? Could she feel frustrated? Really going through that list and then reassessing and planning for next time. And when we reassess and plan for next time, we have to remember that if we're caregiving for somebody that is going through periods where they're aggressive, we need to keep a cell phone with us. You may need to call the police. If you do call the police, don't forget to tell the 911 operator that that person has Alzheimer's disease. Make sure you tell them that as many times as you need to, and tell the police that when they arrive. It is very important that they know that this person has Alzheimer's disease. The other thing, and I'm not going to comment on what people keep in their house, but it is really not a good idea to have any weapons in the house when somebody has Alzheimer's. They get confused, they get suspicious, they get aggressive, and there have been instances where people have used those weapons on their family members. So if you do keep weapons, you want to make sure that they're not loaded, and you want to make sure that they're in a very complicated gun safe that that person can't get into. So Rose talks about her mother, who still speaks Greek, and when she gets angry and agitated, Rose just lets her husband, who does not speak Greek, take Rose's mother on a drive. And that way Rose gets a break and her mother gets to vent a little bit. When someone is aggressive and when someone does display that behavior, it is really important for caregivers to take a break. It doesn't matter that the person doesn't mean it. It doesn't matter that the person has a disease. It is hard to hear somebody call you names. It is hard to dodge somebody that's hitting you. It is hard to feel that tension. And breaks are extremely important. Extremely important. They're necessary. So again, usually aggressive behavior is not dangerous. It's upsetting, but it's not dangerous. Occasionally, the person is a danger to themselves. You may need to speak with their doctor about medical interventions. We don't usually recommend any kind of sedatives or tranquilizers. They are not good for people with Alzheimer's, but the doctor will, maybe do a blood test, see if there's anything out of whack. They'll do a urinalysis, and they may also see if there's any kind of meds that are interacting badly with each other. So, any questions so far?
Oh, it looks like Vanera has a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, and you're muted, Vanera, so if you want to unmute yourself.
There. Part of the operation of any of these programs is the operator doesn't know what she's doing. Anyway, I have a problem with my own self. Okay, I'll use my own example. My memory seems to be going quite rapidly, and I'm concerned that I have something going on. But I'm thinking about my husband's memories. He's has the Lewy body disease, and he's being medicated for a little parts of it. I don't know what, but I guess the question that I have is where are my fears going? Do you wait to be diagnosed? What is to happen?
I thank you for your question. Go to the doctor. Call him today and go in and say, I'm having concerns about my memory, and have them give you, it's called a mini mental cognitive status test, and just ask them for that test, and don't let them say, oh, you're fine, you don't need it. Go to the doctor, and also really ask yourself as a caregiver, are you sleeping? Are you eating? Are you very stressed? All of those things can affect our memory. But I would say, do not wait. Go to the doctor. It might be something. It might be nothing. But you won't know.
I have asked, and I'm getting that feedback. So I will pursue it a little differently.
So remember to advocate for yourselves. And I am, we had a lot of medical problems. My ex-husband and I did with our twins. We had twins and they were born premature, and I had a very bad pregnancy, and I was 23 and I was on medical coupons, so nobody wanted to listen to me. And so I had to learn how to be a very good advocate. And what I used was persistence, but patience. So polite, patient persistence. And I just would keep asking for the same thing. So many times we ask a doctor for something, and if they don't think we need it, they'll say, oh, you're fine, and we let it go. You can simply say, I'm glad for your feedback. I would like the test. And if they won't give you the test, ask to be referred to somebody else or go to a different doctor. We hear this at the Alzheimer's Association a lot, and it's very upsetting. A person wants to be looked at. They want their concerns taken seriously, and they don't need to be placated or patronized, whatever it would be patronized. We deserve to have our concerns taken seriously. You're the customer, right?
Exactly.
It just drives me nuts, because it's like, we're the customer here. We're the ones paying the money. It's our insurance. They work for us. Yet we always feel like we shouldn't be asking for things, and it's our health. It's your body. It's your brain. All right, I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, thank you for that. Really, thank you for that. Because you're helping a lot of people that are in the same boat I'm in.
Good, and tell your friends. Start encouraging each other, right? The doctor isn't king. They're just a doctor. And you're the one that gets to ask for, what you need.
I think it's just trying to differentiate. I can't say the word even. Change the difference between a problem, or is just melody setting in, and it's I mean, we're all rotting and crawling for the curb, I understand.
And, you know, we could talk about this all day because I hear this story all the time. I had a client's mom, and I'll say this and then I'll go on to repetition, but I had a client's mom who all of a sudden started shuffling, started not remembering anything, started having incontinence. She was only 68. And everybody just chalked it up to, oh, okay, I guess she has Alzheimer's. Her mom had Alzheimer's. Here it is. Nobody took her to the doctor. Finally, one of her sisters got really annoyed and said, enough is enough. We're going to the doctor. So they went to the doctor and they found out that she had encephalitis. She had fluid in her brain that was causing these problems. They put a shunt in. The fluid went away. She stopped shuffling. Her memory came back. She became continent again. And she's now 77 and lives a very active lifestyle. We have to go to the doctor when we have, you know, changes in what's normal for us. So let's go to repetition and then we'll take more questions. So repetition can be one of the most difficult behaviors for caregivers. You know, I would venture to guess that even Mother Teresa got tired of people repeating themselves over and over and over again. It's just a difficult behavior. But once I learned why it happens, I had a little bit more empathy. So there's a part of the brain called your hippocampus, and that part of the brain is responsible for recently learned information. So that's the part of the brain that says, you told that story already, you asked that question already, you know, somebody already gave you that answer. That is one of the first areas of the brain to be affected by Alzheimer's disease. So it is very difficult for people to remember recently learned information. So yeah, they may be able to remember what they were doing on May 5th, 1942, like nobody's business. They knew what they wore that day and, you know, the whole 9 yards. But they may not be able to remember that you just answered that question they asked 3 minutes ago. And so this can be very irritating for family members and friends. But what we have to remember is they can't remember. There's a great book written by somebody with Alzheimer's disease. It was written in the early stages of his disease, and the title is called Remember, I Can't Remember. And I just love that title. I was able to ask some folks that had been doing this a really long time, some people that have worked in long-term care for about 35, 40 years. And I asked them, you know, how do you deal with this behavior? How does this not drive you bonkers? And they said, I expect it. I expect the repetition. I don't go into work thinking, gosh, I hope Mrs. Johnson doesn't ask me, you know, if her son's coming 25 times today, because I know she's going to. So setting up that expectation of it's coming, it's just going to be a normal part of your day, really does seem to give people some peace. It's really important to answer the question as kindly and nicely as you can. And then it's really important to figure out, well, why might the behavior be taking place? So go back to detect and connect. Is there a time of day that it seems to get worse? Does it get worse in the evening towards sundowning? Does it get worse around activities of daily living? Does it get worse when there's any kind of, I've noticed in my family, the repetition gets worse if there's ambiguity. If we've told my stepmom that something is happening way farther ahead than we need to, right? She will get anxious and start asking about it over and over again. So it could be something physical. Somebody could be hungry. They could be bored. They could be overstimulated. There could be something going on the body. There could be something that's causing pain. They could be thirsty. Then address emotional needs. A lot of the repetition just comes from that fear that we're forgetting something. That fear that we know something is happening, something's coming, and we can't remember what it is. So I heard some really good advice in a support group once from a gal whose husband was just really struggling with repetition. And she just stopped telling him that things were going to happen in the future. She wouldn't tell them he was going anywhere till the day before, or sometimes that day. You know, she used to say, okay, well, we're going to go to the doctor in about a week. Well, then he would ask about that doctor's appointment, you know, 15 times every single day until they went. And so she finally learned, this is causing anxiety. This is causing him to worry. And so I'm going to stop doing this. So it could be something physical. It could be something emotional. And then we want to try to find a way to redirect that person. And I think I said this last week. If you need a really good example of how to redirect somebody, watch Teepa Snow on YouTube. She is amazing at redirecting. She's amazing. You know, I know that for my family, when my stepmom is really repeating things, if we start, my son is really good at this. My daughter's really good at it too. But if they start asking her questions about stories she likes to tell, you know, she loves to tell about how they didn't know that her kids were twins. And so it was a surprise when they were born. She loves to talk about her grandmother's house. She loves to talk about her attic bedroom. These are things that she likes to talk about. And so if she's doing a lot of repeating, we ask her stories about that and get her to kind of segue into it. So let's see. Wandering. So wandering is really dangerous. It is a really dangerous behavior, and it can happen to 60% of people with dementia without any warning. And I really feel like you can tell when someone's going to wander if you're really paying attention. If someone is talking about going someplace in particular over and over and over again, if they're talking about, a lot of folks with Alzheimer's will say they want to go home, they want to go home, they want to go home. It doesn't matter if they are home. It doesn't matter if they've lived in that house for 35 years. They start talking about wanting to go home, wanting to go to work, wanting to visit someplace. And one of the ways you can tell somebody is going to wander is, first, if they're talking about going someplace a lot, that's one of the first signs. And then if you notice that they're going around gathering things, they're looking for keys, they're looking for purses, they're looking for shoes, it's really a sign that they may be about ready to go someplace. And so what Beverly talks about is her husband, for some reason, got it in his head that he lived with a woman down the street, and that she was not his wife, that Beverly was not his wife, and he needed to be with his wife. And so he went outside in Chicago weather in December in, you know, no shoes, and tried to walk down the street. Luckily, a neighbor, I'm going to take a drink real quick, my mouth is dry. Luckily, a neighbor who knew that he had Alzheimer's spotted him and helped Beverly redirect and get him back in the house. And so if we look at wandering, let's detect and connect. Is that person talking about going home a lot? Are they talking about the need to go someplace? A lot of people have that feeling of wanting to go home. And, you know, I've had that feeling of wanting to go home, even if I am home. It's just a feeling that something's unsettled, something's not right. So see if there are any physical issues. Is the person hungry, tired? Is there medication issues? Could there be a urinary tract infection? Is it too stimulating in the house? Is it too loud? Is it too understimulating? Is the light funny? And then address the emotional needs. One of the things I've heard from students and also from people in support groups is that oftentimes they will, instead of saying you are home, instead of saying this is your home, they will say one of two things that seems to work. Well, tell me about your home. And then it gets the person off on kind of another direction where they're explaining what their home was like so they can kind of get into that story. Or they will say, well, let's find your home. And they will take that person to different rooms in the house. Is this your house? And if it's not, they go to a different room. And more often than not, I have seen, experienced, and heard that once that person kind of gets to a room that's more comfortable, they will say, yeah, this is it. And the other thing I've noticed is many times people have that feeling of not being at home just when they're feeling kind of emotionally uncomfortable. And I don't know about you, but if I don't feel very comfortable, or if I'm kind of sad, or I just feel kind of yucky, I want to be in a room in my house. So my TV room, it has shorter ceilings. It's small. It's wood. It's cozy. If I get a blanket and something warm to hold or something warm to drink, I am going to feel pretty cozy and pretty good. So I've done that with clients too, finding a really comfortable room in their house, preferably small with maybe slanted ceilings or something to cocoon in, is really helpful for people. And then giving them something that's comforting to eat and a blanket. And it really does seem to help. It doesn't always help, but it does seem to help. If you are concerned that your loved one is going to wander, there are a lot of things you can do. First of all, if you're comfortable, tell your neighbors. If you're comfortable with your neighbors, not everybody likes their neighbors. Not everybody wants their neighbors to know their business. But if you're comfortable with your neighbors, tell them, hey, my loved one has Alzheimer's. They may wander. If they do, if you see them, please call me. We have a gal across the street that's had Alzheimer's for about 7 years now. And we know that if we see her out walking, we need to call her husband. That's just how we keep her safe. Also, have a current picture, right? People stop getting their pictures taken after a certain time. And, your 85-year-old loved one who has Alzheimer's is wandering, and they don't have a picture of them that's older than 50 years old. That's not going to be very helpful. There's also, you can put GPS bracelets on. You can, find a whole bunch of things. The other thing that I would do, and I've seen people do, is to make the deadbolt more complicated. Put it up higher, make it so you have to push something and twist something rather than just twist one thing. So make it so it's a little bit more complicated. People have also painted doors to look like walls. They've put signs on them that says no exit. And on our website, we have a whole bunch of tips that you can use. So I just want to show you guys that we are available. We are here. We want you to contact us as often as you like. Our helpline, 1-800-272-3900, that is not a crisis line or an emergency line. You could call that line and ask, hey, how do I get my doctor to listen to me? If they don't listen to me, what do I do? If my family member doesn't want to go and get tested, what can I do? What are some resources that are available to me? What should I look out for? How do I find support groups, education programs? You can go to alz.org and find a safety center. You can find more information on wandering. Our whole goal is really just to provide as much care and support as we possibly can.